of the Agent Carter cosplayers, because there were some really great ones out here. I want to dive right in and talk about just where you were in your career when the role found you.
Let's see. So I think about 8 years ago, and I was classically trained, so I came up through the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Theatre in London, doing lots of adaptations of period dramas. Yeah, lots of plays. And then this kind of opportunity arose to audition for a comic book superhero thing. Okay, I'll go. And just kind of like anything, just approached it as I would any part that I was auditioning for, just to prepare myself for it, to figure out the tone of it and what I felt like would be interesting to try and bring to a character. And it was quite a surreal experience. By the time I got to the final round, I think I'd learned like 8 pages of dialogue. They gave me 20 minutes to learn an unarmed combat scene. They wanted to see how quickly and capable I was of loading and unloading a gun. And they took me to Shepperton Studios in England, where we filmed it. And part of the audition was to have a full crew, getting me into hair and makeup and costume, and spend the whole day auditioning. I remember I almost threw up that morning. It was so huge a production. But I think the thing that stuck out for me was I auditioned with the scene on the phone where she's saying goodbye to him and they're saying, let's meet at the Stork Club. And I looked over and I saw this kind of big, strong alpha assistant director weeping. And I was like, oh, nailed it. So my feeling was, when I came away, I was like, I've done the best I can, and if it's not for me, then I will just move on to the next thing. And that's all you can really hope for in this business, is just turn up, do the best you possibly can, and then let it go. And so to hear a couple of weeks later that I got in the part, it was quite a surreal experience.
Yeah. When in the process did you meet Mr. Evans?
I met him in the offices at Shepperton Studios after we'd all been cast. He was sat there with Sebastian Stan. And I walked in, and I don't think we were just like sizing each other up a little bit. I was being very English and therefore really superior to these American kids that I'd never heard of. I was like, well, I'm classically trained, so it's really important. I think, and then after a while, they were kind of like, okay, no, you're fine, you're cool. I mean, we played computer games in the trailer with each other, and pranks on each other, and so it became quite kind of sibling vibe quite early on, which was nice. And the sense of humor is really, really important to establish between your co-stars, because that creates a warmth and breaks tension, and I think you do better work because of it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about just actors in general and the action films and superhero films are the action scenes and the choreography. Is there one kind of skill you've learned as kind of an action actress that you're very proud to know, kind of how to punch guys, how to take them out in creative ways?
Well, I think it's the skill of selling a punch,
Right.
as opposed to actually punching someone.
Yeah.
That's something that's quite different. It depends on the angle of the camera, the speed at which you throw that punch or that kick, and the speed and the kind of synchronizing of your actor friend reacting to that. I remember in the first season of Agent Carter, there were quite a few men who were harmed. And I actually have in my private archives, that will maybe come out one day, a slow-mo video where my stunt coordinator had filmed me doing a practice run, so I could go back and kind of see where I needed to work on it later on. And I kicked this man in the delicate area. But it's a slow motion, so it's kicking him and him going, oh, and me going, no! And yeah, you'd think by then I'd learned my lesson, but I think there were 4 or 5 other poor stuntmen that suffered under the arms of my kind of confidence and incompetence, until I'd managed to get it right. But I think like my favorite stunt sequence was the diner, which is episode 5 of the first season, where it's just this kind of, it was fantastic music that was playing, and Jarvis thinking he was, a pretty good fighter himself with a tray, I think. But I loved the excitement of turning it into kind of like a dance piece almost, and it was high energy and great fun.
Yeah. When after the fan favoritism of Agent Carter and how wonderful she is in Captain America, When did people start talking to you about the TV series? How did that kind of happen from you making Marvel appearances and then let's give you a show?
Yeah, it was quite late on. I mean, after after the filming of Captain America, I went back to the theatre in England, and I did some other things and other jobs, and kind of let Captain America go as a wonderful experience, but another job. So it kind of came out of the blue a couple of years later. I think after, I think it was like after I kind of did a day on Winter Soldier,
Right.
where she's in the bed, which is literally like kind of took a day, and I went home. It was kind of surreal, you know. The thing is you do something like this, the actual filming takes no time at all. But the impact that a Marvel film has kind of follows me around for years. I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. So I think with the series, that came a couple of years after the first film, and it was Louis D'Esposito, Vice President of Marvel, who championed Peggy and had felt he was the one who really kind of pushed for me to be Peggy. I found out later that I walked in the room and he had already decided then and there that I was going to be his Peggy. And because he was so supportive of it, he kind of called me up and said, I really want to see if we can take this into a series. And he directed the first 2 episodes of the first season, and allowed me to make Peggy equally as strong as she was vulnerable. And I was, I think, grateful to Marvel that being in something that's such a kind of an international sensation, I very much kind of brought my own sense of self and what I thought Peggy could be to it, and I was kind of given free reign of that, and I appreciate that. Rather than feeling like you're like a pawn in a massive chess game, that you could actually have some sort of creative control and drive it yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think all of you guys that are fans would agree. I rewatched it before coming here today. Peggy and the way you play her, as a woman, it is so wonderful to watch her just be as successful in her profession, and it like not being about the fact that she is a woman, that she's just doing her job and she's kick-ass at it, and it's just so satisfying to watch. I'm wondering if there was one thing you got to do as Peggy, or one kind of story arc or something that kind of meant the most to you, or just the fact that you were able to kind of lead this show for 2 seasons.
I think well, I love filming it because you're returning to a group of people who'd had a positive experience with, and by then, you know, we'd had the showrunners, 2 women, Tara Butters and Michelle Fasakis, and you had a great team of writers. And I got to live in LA for a couple of years, which was very sunny compared to the grey of London. And I felt that I think probably by the time we got to the end of the first season, when Michelle Fasakis came up with this tagline of Peggy, where she says, I know my value, anyone else's opinion doesn't really matter, which I know lots of people kind of have responded to, yeah. That for me, it kind of summed Peggy up. That was her kind of manifesto in life. And that was a kind of an underlying quality that enabled her to be in a male-dominated world, but not feel that she was having to prove herself too much, that she understood the social dynamics. She understood that she was going to be invisible to them. She understood that she was going to be undermined, that she was going to be objectified, that she was going to be harassed. And she got on with it. Her love of the job itself, for the sake of the work itself, was more important to her than the obstacles that she found herself in. And I think that was something that really appealed to me as a woman, as an actor, and someone who has not really particularly seen why there should be any limitations to what I want to do because of my sex. Yeah. So that felt something that I could resonate with, and I think that other people have been able to relate to as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful to watch. There's a couple of great YouTube compilations of kind of the most feminist moments in the show, which, you know, we don't have to call them feminist. It's just a woman doing her job the way it's supposed to be done, no matter at what cost. I think some of the fun moments too are when you kind of get to MacGyver, you know, situations with traditionally feminine products, or you know, like belts and buckles and like barrettes. Was in working with the female showrunners, were you able to kind of contribute any specific ideas for second season, or did you kind of let everyone do it?
Not really. The second season took a very different world. I think they'd pushed it into a direction that I remember reading the script with James Darcy, who plays Jarvis, and going, zero matter? What? I don't really. What? Okay. So I think by then, you're working. It's not just Marvel Television, but you're working within the direction of a network that's very specific about what it wants. So that was a different dynamic that you have to kind of take on board. And I think by that point, what I'd loved about the first season is it had tied in the story of Cap, that have felt that it had combined the TV world and the film world in a very kind of satisfying conclusion. And then it was a matter of, well, where do we go from next? And I didn't really have that much input, really. I also felt by then that the writers had such a great kind of take on how Jarvis and Peg might talk, being English. I mean, they'd say lines, they'd write lines. They were all American. They wrote lines, and I'd go, "That's more British than I am. Like, that's really clever. How have they known that we say that? I didn't tell them that." And then James Darcy was, he was kind of, I think with the first season, Louis D'Esposito came up to me, I think, with the first or second scene that James directed. And I'd known him for like 10 years back in London, and he'd said, "I think James is our secret weapon." And he became the kind of the comic relief. And as it came and went on and on, he got more and more childlike and outrageous and ridiculous, and kind of let go his kind of desire for Jarvis to be cool, and just went, "Oh no, I'm not. Okay, that's fine. I'll embrace the other side of Jarvis," and he did it brilliantly.
Yeah, I think a recent scene he was doing exercises or like trying to deadlift in an amazing singlet. I remember seeing, which
Yeah.
I don't know how you kept a straight face, but
That was Eric Pearson who just wrote Thor. That's come out. Amazing, talented young guy who had written the short film, the short Peggy Carter thing I did before the series, and him and James's kind of bromance for each other meant that Eric really enjoyed the power he had to write things in for James to do, that he knows James would be like, "I'm never going to get a date if you make me do something like this." And like turning up going, "I've got to wear a woolen singlet?" And Eric going, and seeing that kind of that bromance develop was very entertaining. But so Eric was a very kind of strong, important force on the direction of each of our characters.
Yeah, and you mentioned your friendship with James, who, if you haven't looked him up, you probably have, but he's had such great performances in films across the board. But it was so nice to see him paired with you. Did he kind of call you as he was auditioning to say, "Should I take this? Should I come in for it?" What was that process like?
I remember we had done Mansfield Park together in the UK, and I had seen him. I remember going to see a play at the Littleton Theatre in the National Theatre in London. I can't remember what it was, but it obviously wasn't very good. I have no idea what it was. But I do remember spotting James in the audience, and he was like, "Oh, hello. Are you doing this Marvel thing?" I was like, "Why? I think so. Apparently it might be a series." And this was before it had been kind of officially greenlit by the network. And then he was like, "Wow, that sounds really fun." And then the next minute, he's kind of waving at me on set, going, "Hello, here I am." And he had, kind of out of the blue got the call, and they didn't know that we knew each other. And it was great. I mean, it was a real, I think, added to our chemistry that we knew each other, and we were instantly comfortable with each other, and enjoyed making each other laugh.
Yeah, the end of the second season. Have you thought about? I think we as fans get a very satisfying smooch between you and your love interest. Finally, if we were kind of thinking, what happens after that? What do you think happens to Peggy after that last episode?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought of it. Well, I'd be curious to know what the fans want for her, what direction. I know that there's talk, some people have said we want to see her founding S.H.I.E.L.D. And that seems like I think, you've had that aspect of her, she's been able to let go in some way of Cap, and move on to, I keep on saying Enver, but it's Sousa, who is played by Enver. And just to kind of see how that develops, really. And but I love the idea that since we know that her funeral that we've seen means that she's probably around 96 when she passes,
Yeah.
which means I'm like, oh, well, I could be employed for the rest of my life. And I was like, I'd love to see Peggy in a power suit with shoulder pads, like Melanie Griffith in Working Girl, and like her Summer of Love era, and being part of the civil rights movement, which I think she would have been very active in, and women rights movement. She's a great cause and she takes action. So there's so many things socially that were going on from the 50s to when she passes now, modern day, that I think that she would have loved to have been a part of. So there's so much that she could have done and probably did do that it could fill another season, I'm sure.
Right.
I hope.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everyone. I mean, you have dropped into some of the major Marvel films. We saw her in Ant-Man, we saw Ultron, all that stuff. I would assume you have a pretty good relationship with Kevin Feige, who runs all this stuff. So can we just call him and find out? Do you talk to him frequently enough to like ever hear if they kind of want to drop you in more, or how do you ever find out?
Well, they're appropriately secretive because they know that I have quite a big mouth, so they don't tell me anything. I mean, it's so secretive that even the titles of the film, when we're filming them, have different names, and they can change the scenes as they go along, and they want to protect it, mainly because if people are going to spoil it, then it spoils it for fans when it does eventually come out, and the wait and the excitement of the expectation is what is eventually the greatest payoff. So I think even with Peggy, also because the Marvel world takes on so many different worlds and parallel universes, that anything can kind of happen, really. And I think it's they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary and of this kind of block of incredible films and what they've been able to do, and the number of amazing actors that they've been able to bring part of it. We did this photo shoot recently, which I think was for Vanity Fair, of all the actors that have been involved in the last 10 years, and it was like I felt like I was at the Oscars. I was just like, Jeff Goldblum, hello, oh my God, wow, and people that of course I hadn't worked with, but yeah, you go, oh yeah, you're somehow connected. So I think anything is possible, and I'm sure that if there is a possible place for Peggy in the future, hopefully I'll get the call. You've been recast, but yeah, I'd be happy to do it again.
How much notice did you have for when they brought you in on Ultron and Ant-Man and Winter Soldier?
Oh, it was what was amazing about it is they were so blasé.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, can you film next week? And like, we'll send you like the outfit you're gonna wear, and then you get there that morning, like, here's the scene. You're like, okay. And it's all, I mean, they're very passionate about what they do, but they're very relaxed about it because they don't want to get anyone's hopes up too much. You also don't know if you're going to make it to the edit. It's very much their kind of domain. So with Ant-Man, I think I was doing something else. It was like one day again, and then again, yeah, it's very, it's very quick.
Gotcha.
And there is that kind of thing of like, love you, gonna bring you back, and you're like, are you just being nice? I don't know. Until you get the actual call and you're like, this is the day, this is what you're doing. You're left kind of going, okay, well, that's I'm just gonna live in the unknown.
Right. Have you kept anything of Peggy's? Were you able to keep?
I think I've got her wig from the first one in my attic. And I've got actually for the first season of Agent Carter, the props master had gathered. I love props. I love working with them, and I think it comes from theatre days of like knowing how to use a prop and working the space, and how your relationship with objects in front of you can tell the audience a little bit about your character or even your frame of mind. If you're angry, you can express your anger through the way that you stir sugar in your tea. Like, I love stuff like that. It's very kind of makes the character very nuanced. But this prop master could see like my obsession with things, so I'd just be playing with a nitramine ball in between takes, or just twiddling the keys of her, the women's house that she lives in, and kind of been fascinated with the vial of blood of Cap. And he created this beautiful cabinet for me at the end of the season, which he'd taken. He just noticed all the props I had I had played with and had put them all in. And there's a gun in there, a rubber gun. There's Jarvis's business card. There's a picture of Skinny Steve. There's her key. It's very sweet, very cute. And I've got that at home in London as something to always remember the experience by.
That's great. With Captain America, the first film, do you have like a favorite scene or anything that like you guys shot that didn't make it? I think we've all watched the DVDs and the bonus features, so we've heard a lot about it. But is there one thing when you think about the first Captain America movie that sticks in your head the most about that experience?
I mean, I've said this loads of times, but probably like grabbing his boob, which is.
We
like,
love to hear that.
impromptu.
It's all
But
good.
that was also, and I don't think they necessarily. I don't think that they had done this on purpose just to test me. I think they were just like scheduling wise, we can't, because I hadn't seen his body yet. And it'd been a bit weird if they're like, okay, Hayley, so we're going to schedule in, so you're going to have the private reveal of Chris's body to yourself just before we do the scene. Like, I understand it wasn't like an important priority for them to schedule that time out. I would have really appreciated it, but that wasn't on offer. I was an unknown actress back then. I get it. I couldn't make demands. Yeah, just kind of going, oh my God, you are massive. When did that how did that happen? I mean, what? It was very kind of, oh, hello. I felt like a very British in that moment. Very kind of, oh yes, just checking, everything's all right there. It was kind of very innocent, really. So that was sweet. And then, gosh, I remember having a lot of fun with everyone. Stanley Tucci is an amazing actor and married my friend, so I was very happy about that because now I get to see more of him. And we just had lots of fun. We went out to jazz clubs in London and played running charades, which I'm sure you all know if you're Chris Evans fans that he loves to do because he's great at games. But I just think the whole experience was it was a very fun one. It was like big kids playing, messing around.
Yeah. How about with 2 seasons of the show? Are there kind of like standout moments from season 1 and season 2 that you're just so happy to have on your reel, as it were?
It's really hard to say. I haven't actually seen the second season.
Oh,
I know it sounds bizarre. I just haven't seen it. I don't tend to watch my work. I know some actors love it and some actors don't. I'm of the latter. I don't find it useful at all. I'll just critique myself and go, well, now the whole world has seen that and your career is over. So I'm like, it's no point. Like, it's just not going to help me. But I think I love the banter between Jarvis and Peggy, and I'd love to see more of that. The chemistry of those two and having a relationship between them where they know each other so well that they also have the ability to push each other's buttons. They know what their Achilles heel is, as that scene in the second season does in the desert. And yet there's a kind of a frisson between them that's not romantic. And I think that's great. Doesn't have to be they don't have to secretly be in love with each other for their relationship to be interesting. And I liked that. I also love the fact that you had the relationship with Angie, where you had 2 girls looking out for each other, and not being pitted against each other. And they're both, struggling in their own way to navigate their way through life on their own terms. Angie working in the diner, wanting to become an actress. Peggy living this double life, not really being able to form friendships because people around her would die if she got too close to them. And they're kind of, although Angie didn't know that about Peggy, there was like a meeting each other on a common ground where they looked out for each other. And I very much appreciate that. I think it's great to see more of that, of relationships and friendships, more of as they are and as I feel they are represented in real life. It's when you make any kind of show or film, we're hopefully reflecting back as to elements of what society is really like. That's the whole point of why I do plays or films in the first place, to find some kind of common ground that connects to an audience. So to create relationships that I see in my everyday life, sisterhood, relationships with men that are not just romantic, but still very meaningful, for me is, I think, I'd love to see more of.
Yeah, it's both seasons. It's just such a joy to watch because it's so unique in its own way. Did you always know you wanted to be an actor?
Yeah, I did. I was a very shy kid and I was an only child. I was not a jazz handsy performery kind of kid, so I didn't necessarily know if I could do it. I just knew when my mum would take me to the theatre and the lights would go down, there was this excitement of, and I'm in a room with a bunch of strangers, and I'm about to go on this kind of a journey, watching these people on stage who I don't know yet. By the end of the evening, I feel like I know them, and I thought that was magic. It's like, how do you do that? And I'd seen women on stage, like Dame Judi Dench and Helen Mirren and Fiona Shaw and Juliet Stevenson, some of these names that you wouldn't necessarily heard of because they don't have big, glittering, glamorous careers, but they have a skill set and a craft and an intelligence that blew my mind when I saw them. And I wanted to find out what it was like to be in that world. And so that's kind of where it came from, really. So this kind of sidetrack into this comic book world is like, oh, hello, it's new, hello. And very welcome, really fun.
Yeah. Where do you feel about, or how do you feel kind of about where you are in your career right now? Because you've done so many different things. We were talking before about, I was watching her Black Mirror episode this morning, and it's beautiful, but I had to stop because I knew I was going to get too sad.
Yeah, it gets pretty sad. It's not
What are you enjoying kind of about what you get offered and what you get to go after and kind of what's coming up next?
Yeah, work for me in the last 2 years since I finished Peggy has taken on a turn that for me has been a very empowering one. I learned a lot about leadership within a set, how to create a good working ethic that had a positive effect on the people working around me, creating a sense of fun and play. And so I was grateful to have had that experience with Peggy in order to learn the ropes of that, because there's a different thing with playing a character, which is my job, but then also playing the lead in a show and the dynamics of a working environment like that. And so since then, been able to take on quite mature material, like Kenny Lonergan, who won the Oscar last year for his direction of and writing and direction of Manchester by the Sea. He adapted Howard's End, which is out in April here in the US on Stars. And it's a literary adaptation, and it's a woman who is as intellectually brilliant as she is empathetic. Her intelligence is not off-putting. It's kind of amazing to watch, and someone who had to, has lots of kind of changes of thought and ideas, and her life takes us in different directions, and it was a real character study. And for me as an actor, it felt that I wouldn't have been able to do that a couple of years ago, and I've been able to kind of build up to be able to do parts like that. And then doing the Christopher Robin film for Disney with Ewan McGregor, which comes out in August, which was great fun, working with live action Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. It was quite intimidating because they're so much more famous than me. And and you kind of like doing a scene where, and of course you have to sell it as a very truthful thing. So they would bring in the stuffed animals, and they'd be operated by actors, and they'd be chatting to you and you'd chat back. And then they would take the stuffed animals away and bring back headless versions of the stuffed animals. So they get a sense of where they're going to put the head in post-production. And it was suddenly like this Guillermo del Toro version. It was really bleak and dark. And you're like, Kanga doesn't have a head. And then you do the pass again. So then you do the scene. And then the next one is, I almost feel like they're just doing it to mess with you. Because then by the third pass, they're bringing in a rod with a light on it. And you're like, that's Pooh Bear, is it? Okay. And every time the light goes on, you realize that he's meant to be talking in that moment. So you kind of wait, and then the light goes off, and you go, interesting, Pooh. Yes, I agree. Okay. And that was really fun. And I'd worked with Ewan on a Woody Allen film years ago, and so I knew him from then. So that was very nice. And then I'm currently in rehearsals for a play in London, and I have come here. I've flown 10 hours to go 10 hours back tonight to go back into rehearsal rooms tomorrow morning. So, that doesn't deserve a round of applause. No, it's not special at all. No. What it is it's a really exciting and busy time in that I get to kind of explore different material, and I'm really, really grateful to be in an industry that I love and care about. Yeah.
We're happy to have you in it. Are you a trained singer? Because we did hear your voice in Cinderella, which I loved. If you haven't, go back and find her singing beautifully in it. And I wonder if you and Ewan, because he has a lovely voice too. If he
Yeah.
ended up singing,
Oh yeah, Ewan and I sang quite a bit. It might be in the maybe if they do either a blooper reel or something, because we'd find ourselves, we were in a car a lot. I mean, there's a sequence in a car that took quite a while, so it's just a lot of us kind of like just starting a little musical in the car between us, which was very sweet. He's got a wonderful voice. Cinderella, no, I guess I'm not tone deaf, but I wouldn't say I was a singer. Had never sung professionally, and had learnt a little bit about taking care of my voice at drama school and understanding how to manipulate it a little bit, and how to breathe properly and maybe hold a note and also act a song. So I'm definitely not an Adele, but I can kind of act a song, if that makes sense. And so with Cinderella, I remember the read-through of the script came, and I had been doing a play in the evening, and I was filming Cinderella during the day, and going for the initial script read-through with all the cast sitting around a table, and then going through it, and then realizing that the lines that were in italics were me singing. And I remember being in the car going, okay, and then Googling, kind of thinking, oh, that's a nursery rhyme, and Googling it just to get the tune, because I didn't remember what the tune was, and trying to learn it kind of in the car, and then just winging it, which is kind of a lot of what my experience in this industry has been. Just go for it. Don't try and overthink it. Sometimes it's not going to work out well for you. Sometimes you're going to get away with it.
yeah, it's good. It's good. Have you had any I keep envisioning all the women in the Marvel universe. There's some amazing women. We've already talked about it. Kate Blanchett and Thor was a welcome addition. Have you guys talked about kind of forming your own little, I don't know, coalition to just get an all-female, all-superhero with Peggy in some version before '94? Have you interacted with any of those actresses at all about that?
No, I haven't had the opportunity even to chat about it with them. I'd met a few very much in passing. And what was great is that you don't feel that, these women, from Scarlett and Elizabeth Olsen and the women that I had come into contact with, even when the photo shoot that we did recently, and going, oh God, there's so many lovely ladies here. Yeah. But what we collectively, when we're all together, it doesn't feel that we are the women in a man's world. It doesn't feel like that at all. It's just very relaxed, and these women have careers of their own, and they are powerful presences, and they're intelligent, and they bring their own thing to what they do and what they play. I'd love to. Look, Scarlett wants to give me a call and offer me a chance to be her sidekick. I'd happily do that.
Yeah, we'll keep talking about it, because I feel like Scarlett and Brie and Lupita and Tessa Thompson. I'm a reporter, so I get to talk to these other women sometimes, and they did say they went up to Kevin Feige and were like, let's do some sort of all
together.
Something.
Great idea. Yeah.
Who knows if it'll happen, but if I keep talking about it and we bring
well,
it up,
then you keep talking
about
it.
We can get it out
just
there.
Keep incessantly calling.
Yeah. I want to turn it over to some fan questions. I hope you guys have a few. I'm happy to keep peppering Miss Hayley with questions, but if you have some burning questions, I'm happy to turn it over to you guys. There is a microphone back there with my friend Joe. You can just get up and go and find him with the microphone. Yes, front row seaters up for questions.
If you could write a reunion for Steve and Peggy, how would you write it?
Aww.
It would be a screaming match. Where have you been? It was such a stupid idea, saving the world. What are you doing? I think it'd be really funny if, you imagine that everyone's like, oh, they're going to be their big reunion, and they just have a massive, epic domestic. I think it'd be quite good, yeah.
Hi. How did you feel about the development of the romantic triangle in the second season of Agent Carter?
Okay. I haven't seen it, so I can't really remember. What did I think about it?
Yeah.
It was complicated. It was, it's not a very it's not a very relaxing situation to be in. But I thought I liked that they'd kept it. You don't know until the end, and I like the fact that with Reggie, his character's backstory being something that Peggy could kind of find connection with, how much harder it had been for him, and how much harder it had been from her, given who they were. And that being not fair and giving them a drive because of that partly. And so I think that was where their connection stemmed from. And then also it's the same with Sousa. He's capable, but his physical disability is seen by the other by idiots in the SSR as something that makes him have to work harder to prove himself. Initially, in the beginning. But he's so brilliant that it just becomes something that it doesn't even need to be referenced by the end of it. And that's him transcending himself and his own fears of his own limitations. And I think that's something that Peggy really connected to as well. And I think that's also what she liked about Cap, is that she fell in love with Skinny Steve because of his spirit. And that's I think that's kind of a lovely addition than just going, who's the hottest guy? I'll pick him.
Thank you.
Hi. Were there any scenes that you filled in the first Avenger that you really enjoyed but didn't end up in the final cut?
No, I think everything's in there. Yeah, I think it felt like they ended up using me more than I thought. Like Peggy, for me, ended up becoming a bit bigger than how I initially read her on the script, on the page, which was, I was very happy about. But I think, pretty much everything is in there, unless I'm living in some sort of self-denial, but my big monologue and an emotional breakdown was removed. I think everything's in there. It was pretty, it was a pretty kind of fully formed movie, I think, with what it set out to be and what it was able to accomplish.
You've seen that one, right?
What, the Outburst?
Captain America.
The first one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I saw that one.
Just making sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hi.
so you've talked a couple times about how this role kind of took you by surprise. Did just the empowerment that you gave to so many girls and women, can you speak a bit about how that, the effect of that for you personally?
Yeah, I didn't know that until I started coming to conventions. That the difference with being on stage is that you get a sense of the impact, and you can you have a relationship with an audience a little bit. You're getting a sense of what's going on, but with film you really don't. So it was only kind of coming to conventions and seeing men and women and boys and girls having resonated something in Peggy. I was especially moved by women in the military who I'd met at conventions, or women who were having a difficulty at work, or not feeling that they were heard, or feeling that they were having to prove themselves more, but then taking great comfort in realizing that there is a quiet revolution going on, which is the practice of self-care and self-worth. And therefore once you have that being the most important relationship to cultivate, because that's going to have a knock-on effect in the environment around you. But if you try and affect the environment for the sake of it, because you feel invisible, you're going to come up against kind of a negative impact, because you're doing it for the sake of being seen. But if you're doing it for the sake of your own enjoyment of the work, that has a knock-on effect. And I think it was very humbling to see that, really. And I had not felt that, what I was doing was making Peggy this amazing woman. I just felt like I had been a very independent young woman myself, and feeling very strong in who I was and outspoken, and partly having parents who encouraged me to ask questions and to challenge my own limitations of who I thought I was or what I felt like I could do in the world, and seeing other women do it. I think I've been very inspired by other women. And when I see another woman doing something that I would like to try, I'd go, well, if I can see it's happening, then maybe it is possible. And I think that's really, really crucial for all girls and boys as well, to have those role models to go, we can I can pave the way. I mean, for me, I was brought up in inner city London in social housing. I didn't come from privilege. Single parent family. My father was living in the States and I live with my mum. And so any misconceptions of the idea that I had privilege to be where I am now are false. And as I've gotten older, have appreciated that even more because I've had to forge my way one step at a time and hopefully be a representation of the fact that it is possible, and that I didn't have any contacts, I didn't have any money, I couldn't afford a headshot, I didn't know where to begin, but there was just enough of a hunger in me and enough of a interest in it to go, I will find a way, but I'll find a way that's in line with my own value system, that's in line with my own integrity. I'll take constructive criticism only if it's useful to me and let go of the rest. And it's an ongoing journey that everyone has to, figure out. And that's kind of where I've kind of come out today. And it has been just really wonderful to be able to meet other people who have felt that Peggy represents something within them as well. And there's and creating that common ground between us. So there's a dialogue between, actor and audience, because that's kind of the whole point of what I do. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
So I first saw you in Pillars of the Earth, and that's where I fell in love with acting. And so as an actor, when you go back home, how does it feel when you see people who recognize you on the street? How does that affect you, I guess?
Well, it's very lovely. I think, it might be quite difficult for actors who are known for playing really mean villains. They might get, some people kind of get booed in the street because they're so convincing at how evil they are. Luckily, Peggy's kind of a good one, so people have been very kind about her. But I get left alone a lot in the UK, which is something I've wanted, because there's this weird thing that comes with, as a byproduct of success in this industry, means that there's a fame or I can't even say the word. Celebrity.
You got it. You got it. Celebrity.
That I find very distracting to, and I think also very damaging to a person's psyche. It feeds narcissism, this kind of belief that you can be famous for the sake of it, but you're not really offering society anything. You're not being of service. And you can imagine I'm a massive fan of reality TV. So I think that it's something that I've managed, but I don't seek it. So I know that if I don't go to certain places, I won't get photographed. If I don't dress in a ball gown going to the supermarket, I probably won't get noticed. And that's how I want it to be. It's a huge compliment. When I've had dinners with people, and they'll be like, were you in? And I'm like, oh, it's a part of my ego's like, didn't you know that? I've worked so hard, how could you not know? And then wanting to reel off my CV and being like, but then the other part of it is like, oh, that means I must have done my job, because you don't want to be too, you don't want to be kind of too known for who you are. You want to be able to be believable in living and telling another story. So that's kind of something that's important to me, really. And it just means that I can stop thinking about myself and my public brand and all that business, and concentrate more on making good work and being better at that, and having the headspace to concentrate on things that I really enjoy.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one last quick question. I'm so sorry. We could spend all day with Hayley. Obviously, she doesn't have the time, but last quick question.
Hi.
Hi. What do you think the future might have held for Steve and Peggy if he hadn't gone off?
Oh, they would have been very happy and had lots of babies, and she would have made him stay at home with them.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so
Hayley.
much for having me. Bye.
Thank you.